Billy Corben is a documentary filmmaker whose credits include Cocaine Cowboys, Screwball, and most recently on Hulu, God Forbid. He also co-hosts a podcast with Dan Le Batard called Because Miami, an extension of the wildly popular hashtag Billy started on Twitter that showcases the ridiculousness of Billy's hometown. And he'll be in Austin in a few days for this year's ATX Television Festival, discussing the art of storytelling. For tickets and more info, go to atxfestival.com. Billy, thank you so much for the time. How you doing today?
Good, Trey. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. So I'm excited to have you in town for this year's ATX Television Festival. I know you've been here at least a couple of times because you've been on Rogan's show before, and I feel like you participated in another Austin festival in the past, although I don't recall which one. Have you spent much time in Austin? And if so, what do you enjoy about this place?
Yeah, as exciting as it is to see you, I'm mostly excited about Terry Black's, to be perfectly honest. That's what we premiered our doc Square Grouper, The Godfathers of Ganja at South by back in like 2011-ish, 2012-ish. And that was my first time in Austin. And I was just like, oh man, we got to try to come back here like all the time. And I don't get back there as much as I want. Usually when Rogan invites me, that's when I manage to get into town. And then I was like, I'd always try like a different barbecue spot. And I'm like, where should I go? And he said Terry Black's. So that's like my first and last spot.
So you might wait in a little bit of a line at Terry Black's, but the thing with barbecue here, and there are places that I think are overrated, Terry Black's certainly is not. You want to find that balance between really good barbecue and length of line. So as great as Franklin Barbecue is, you want to sit there and tailgate for 4 hours waiting for your barbecue lunch. Terry Black's, you can usually get through that line in like 20 to 30 minutes max. And it is as good as any barbecue in this city. And by the way, they have the best sausage in this city too. I don't know if you've ever tried the sausage before, but when you're there this weekend, definitely get some of the sausage.
And I'm familiar with overrated. I mean, I just watched that Boston Celtics game against the Heat. So,
oof. Yeah, speaking of, not to bury the lead, you being a Miami guy, how happy are you that your Heat didn't just completely collapse over the last week or so?
Dude, I got to tell you, there was a lot of Heat fans that got post-game 6 got pretty fatalistic about this series. They like, including a bunch, a lot of my friends at the Dan Le Batard show, they were just like, they just thought that it was a foregone conclusion. It was just inevitable that the Heat were going to lose this thing in Boston. And I was like, that game 6, they were not supposed to be in that game, Miami Heat. And they were in that game to the last 0.1 seconds of that game. And I don't know, I'm usually people think I'm a pessimist. I'm actually a realist, but I saw the silver lining here. I'm like, I don't know about this. I'm like, the only thing better than for Miami fans than to watch the Heat win it at home is for Boston fans to have to witness the Heat doing it in their house, like the Panthers did in the same building, no less, another game 7. So I don't know. I thought that was, I don't know. It was like we had that fairy tale moment at the end of game 6. I mean, I called it the Teen Wolf moment, right? There was Butler on the line. This is a legacy making moment for him. He got 3. He had 3 shots. I'm like, holy shit. I'm sorry. I'm like, the guy could win the game right now, not tie the game, win the game right now. And he did for about 3 seconds, But my Miami fans are used to that, going back to the Fiesta Bowl and Terry Porter throwing that late yellow flag, and stealing that natty away from the Miami Hurricanes. So that was a devastating, just like emotional roller coaster, that end of game 6. And I don't know, I just thought, Boston Celtics didn't show up to their own arena, man. That's what happened.
No, the Heat essentially went Patrick Swayze and Roadhouse and ripped the Celtics collective throats out with a lot of time left in that game too, where it was the fourth quarter and people had vacated their seats for good. I mean, that arena was mostly empty by the time the final buzzer sounded. And a lot of that has to do with the guy that you just mentioned, Jimmy Butler, who was a Bull when I was in Chicago a decade or so ago. And I saw him pick up where Derrick Rose left off when he started suffering injury after injury. You saw how much of a player that dude was with the Bulls, and he's only continued to prove it over time. And now I would say that I don't know if he's the best player in the league necessarily, but there aren't many guys in this league that I would rather have on the floor for me during clutch time than Jimmy Butler.
I mean, ESPN analytics, 3%, 3%. They gave the Heat to win this series. I mean, that's in Miami. There's just something about, it's always been in sports anyway, an underdog town. I think in part because it's so young, a lot of our franchises are relatively young. So everybody thinks they need to smack down the baby brother kind of a thing. But there seems to be nothing that fuels Miami teams, Miami players. It's this perpetual chip on your shoulder. It's this idea that you have to prove something, and it's a real us against the world kind of mentality. And a town as fragmented and siloed and self-segregated as Miami is, it really takes, the Miami Heat to bring us together. It really does.
Well, the reality too with this Heat team, with as many undrafted guys who are on this roster, you kind of are the underdogs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is it's amazing. It's like the island of misfit toys, right? It's it's this ragtag band of misfits that clearly nobody wanted, right? On any team, let alone together on one team. And listen, this is the genius of Pat Riley. And this is I don't know that there's ever been a more underrated coach in the history of professional sports than Eric Spoelstra. I mean, everybody sort of looks at this guy as the tape guy, which is how he got started. But I mean, is there a guy who can cultivate a team from what conventional wisdom says is nothing? Like this guy can. You can give him the 3 greatest players of all time and he'll win championships, or you give him, this ragtag band of misfits and he'll go to the finals. I mean, it's a remarkable, remarkable career.
That's a great take there. I appreciate that. We'll get back to sports here in just a little bit because I want to talk to you about your former school, the University of Miami. That's right, the U, and then really
former school. You make it sound like we got a divorce or something. My ex school. I graduated, dude. I graduated.
Once your school, always your school, especially if you have the degree. So we're going to get to the Miami leading the charge on pushing the limits on NIL just a little bit. But I did want to talk with you about what you're going to be here in town for at the ATX TV Festival this weekend. And that is to take part in a panel on the art of storytelling. You obviously proven yourself to be one of the most adept documentary storytellers out there with all the different efforts that you have over time. In your opinion, Billy, what is the key to telling a good story?
Well, the first job of a documentary filmmaker is to find a good story and don't screw it up. So sometimes there's an R-rated version of that. You can imagine what that is. That was my PG-13 rated version. The PG version is find a good story and then tell it well, which is easier said than done. And especially when you're in the nonfiction world, that's literally what you have to go out and do. You have to find a good story, or in some cases, if you're lucky, a good story will find you. And then you just have to tell it well, and you have to tell it in a way that is going to keep the audience engaged and that is going to do the story justice. And so, you need to consider that it's not just what you say, but how you say it, because first and foremost, we are journalists, and so we have an obligation to the truth. It's nonfiction filmmaking. It has to be factual. But we also, as filmmakers, have a responsibility to entertain. So we call our genre, if you will, or our style of filmmaking as pop docs, because they tend to be a little bit pulpier, a little bit more fun, hopefully a little bit more cinematic, and hopefully more digestible. And in that way, I think it's kind of fun. We did a doc last November, now the highest rated or most watched doc in Hulu history, called God Forbid, the sex scandal that brought down a dynasty. And our co-producer Todd Schulman, he refers to that doc and some of the best of our work as Trojan horse filmmaking, which is to say that we kind of tempt the audience with the sugar of oh, this is a sex scandal doc. And then while you're there, chewing it up, we slip in the broccoli. We get the vegetables in there. And maybe over the course of the 3-act story, you maybe learn something about, the world or yourself at the same time.
Well, you sound like me trying to make meals for my 8 and 6-year-old at night. I like it. That works really well.
Yeah. get a dog to eat its medicine or something. Yeah, yeah.
Is there a common quality amongst the stories that you find yourself drawn to enough to want to put your efforts into telling on the big or small screen?
Oh, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly like Florida and Miami in particular is kind of a motif here. I mean, this is an remarkable just resource. I mean, it's like it's a just filled with our natural resource here is characters and stories, you know, and it's just like you just need to mine this town. I mean, we have a Google spreadsheet of great like stories and characters, Florida men and women that doesn't we can live 100 years and never be able to tell all of those stories. It's just a great, you know, Miami's just has and always will be a sunny place for shady people. You know, it's the Miami's the mistress, it's not the wife. So people come down here to act a fool, to launder not only their money but their name and their reputation. So they come down here and they can just kind of be whoever they want to be, regardless of who they were, wherever they came from, north, south, east, or west before. So it tends to be an exciting and funny and funny place that way. So I think that's really the inspiration. And also I think, you know, the American dream by any means necessary. So, you know, hustlers, whether it's a legal hustle, illegal hustle, you know, gray market hustle. I think a lot of those stories, you know, those Tony Montana-esque kind of like twisted Horatio Alger, you know, overcoming adversity to get it all and then finding a way somehow to lose it. I think those are just, and again, it's not a uniquely Miami thing, but there's a lot of those kind of like, you know, easy money, fast money stories down here that audiences, I think, just really like.
For people who are unaware, Billy, you are the guy who popularized the "Because Miami" sentiment on Twitter first off, and now you are getting to co-host a podcast with Dan Le Batard that is also titled "Because Miami." What do you love about getting to add this storytelling medium to your arsenal?
Well, you go around the country and the world, and people, you know us as like the Miami guys, you know, my producing partners and I. And so people have questions like, why is Miami like this? Why are you like this? Why can't you have nice things? Why is Florida, you know? And so I just had to come up with a shorthand, you know, just to be able to answer those questions. And it's just because Miami, I mean, there really isn't a lot of ways you can explain it. You know, I talk a lot about Miami, but talking about Miami is like dancing about architecture. It's like you just have to kind of experience it, or maybe watch some of our docs to just be like, oh, I'm never gonna understand this place. You know, they call it, you know, they call Florida like, you know, the Australia of the United States, because it's just this sort of like peculiar, inexplicable, like almost planet unto itself. You know, they say the great thing about Miami is it's so close to the United States. And so it's just like America's Casablanca. And it's like, listen, it's where Flagler's railroad ended, right? That was Manifest Destiny, was to just get the railroad to as far south as you could possibly get in the United States and battle the Skeeters and the Gators, and, you know, to make it happen. And they did. And they were kind of like, well, what the hell is this place for? What are we going to do here? You can barely live here, you know, in those days before there was DDT and central air conditioning. So they realized, oh, this is going to be another place. This is going to be, you know, I always say that LA is where you go when you want to be somebody. New York is where you go when you are somebody. And Miami's where you go when you want to be somebody else. So that's the vibe.
Yeah, lots of deadbeat dads there. I like to refer to Florida as as America's most flaccid member. And a lot of that has to do with the example that Florida Man has set over and over again in news stories. You obviously highlight these in a roundabout way with the "Because Miami" hashtag. And I feel like Florida Man, in an efforts to be the most successful version of him or herself, goes to Miami to try and accomplish those things. But for you who has lived here, or lived there rather, your entire life, is there an up close and personal example that you have of getting to see Florida Man in action, actually in person?
I mean, the last couple of years with the crypto cowboys down here, I mean, the way that Miami became the crypto capital of the world just in time for that to do what everybody thought it was going to do. There was only one way for that to go, and the second Miami embraced it, because we don't really have indigenous industry here. We subsist from hustle to hustle. Our economy is all tourism and unsustainable growth in real estate and development. And so we're just, we don't have reality, we have realty, so no one wants to, they say I'm a Miami hater. The problem is I'm a Miami truth teller, and nobody wants that down here. Miami is a place where, truth is hate and lies are love, because that's realty, dude. That's selling a dream or selling a property or a luxury condo or a luxury car, whatever it is. And so, of course, this would become ground zero for not Bitcoin and Ethereum per se, but the shit coins. The hustle, what we call mierda coin, like in Spanish. Like these were not places that people should park their money. These were scams, straight up. And the mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, was selling magic beans. He was selling imaginary coins. He got involved with this Miami coin scheme that while he was profiting from it, the holders of the coin lost 99% of their value until it was finally delisted from the only crypto exchange that would even bother to trade it. And it was just like, again, we saw all of this coming. But as soon as Miami embraced it, it was like, okay, all right, hang on. Now everybody needs to really do their due diligence here, because if you didn't know something was up before, Miami's like wholesale like buy-in, that was the ultimate indicator. Now, of course, it made perfect sense that like the money laundering capital of the Americas was going to embrace one of the best and fastest and easiest ways to launder money. But it wasn't just that. It was the idea that it was all of the illegitimate cryptocurrencies that came in, and then suddenly everybody was selling their own coin, and you just knew that this was gonna. I mean, Miami is like if Fire Festival was an entire city. Like that's what Miami is like. And that was Miami in the pandemic. It was Fire Festival countywide, and the government was in on it. And we kind of have to do that because with a transient population, a lack of institutional memory. I don't know if you remember the movie Breakdown with Kurt Russell back in the 90s.
Yes.
He's like, he and his wife are moving across country, and they like stop in this like one like gas station truck stop kind of town, and the wife gets kidnapped. And Kurt Russell's trying to find her, and they want him to pay a ransom, and he goes to the sheriff, and the next thing you know, we realize is, spoiler alert, folks, it's 30 years old. So if you haven't seen it already, it's not like Succession or anything, but like, I'm going to spoil it. Like, he finds out that everybody in this little town is in on this. This is actually their hustle. They wait for who they perceive as like moneyed folks coming through town. They kidnap one of them. They get paid a ransom, and everybody moves on. Like, and that's Miami. It's like you come to Miami, we're all kind of in on it. We're going to grab you by the ankles. We're going to turn you upside down and shake you until all the money falls out of your pockets, and then we'll send you along your way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to frame it, because there may be individuals who are most responsible. Ultimately, it is the system that is not just rotten at the core, but rotten near the top as well, because everybody's livelihood relies on the scam itself continuing. And I love that you call yourself a realist with regards to your state and your city, because that's how I feel about Texas a lot of the time. Like, I was born in Texas, did my growing up in the DFW area, and I live in Austin now, which in my opinion is the most tolerable of the places to live in the state of Texas. But I'm sorry, when every month is truck month on commercials on television, I'm going to have to call it out, because that is a ridiculous concept in January, February, all the way through December too.
Truck month, did you say?
Yeah, every month is truck month, Billy. You watch broadcast television, let's say, every third commercial talks about how it's truck month this month. Every month can't be truck month. I'm sorry.
I love every month's iguana month down here.
Yeah, and you got to be careful about the when temperatures get to freezing too, because falling iguanas are a serious cause for concern.
Yes, the chicken of the trees start they start falling. And even more frightening is they burrow. They burrow, and they actually get into the foundation of infrastructure of buildings, of roads, of bridges, and they collapse. I mean, like I've seen it happen to houses, to docks, to seawalls. I mean, it's crazy. They are wild, treacherous creatures. But enough about the mayor and the city commission.
All right. So we're going to shift from corruption to a different level of corruption. And that has to do with college sports and NIL during the fray a couple of years ago, because your Miami Hurricanes, not your ex-Hurricanes, your current Miami Hurricanes are leading the charge with regards to not even hiding the fact that they are luring guys from one school to the U based on how much they can promise for that next season.
Guys and girls.
Yeah, that's true. When does the college sports NIL thing get the Billy Corben treatment? How far down the road do we have to go for that one?
Well, of course, Miami became University of Miami. Hurricanes athletic department became the first school, of course, penalized by the NCAA for an NIL related infraction. I don't know how legitimate it was, but it seems like it might have been something untoward. It was the women's basketball team and the coach, the Cavender twins, and of course the now kind of internationally notorious John Ruiz of LifeWallet fame. In fact, I have an NIL deal, so I had to mention LifeWallet just now on the program. Everywhere I go, I have to. In fact, I'm supposed to be wearing a shirt. My bad. Yeah, I mean, listen. Here's one of these kind of classic only in Miami characters, right? This kind of self-proclaimed billionaire, but he's a lawyer who does like these Medicare cases, and he's got a SPAC, and he's going public, and the stock is now trading at like, it's lost nearly 100% of its value. It's trading at 60. I mean, like he just got the delisting notification from NASDAQ. I mean, like, the whole thing is just absolutely fabulous, right? Like, I mean, if you're in the 30 for 30 business, like this is a dream come true. And it's like the ultimate because Miami. Like, but here's the thing I have to say to the defense of my alma mater is that us in Miami, we're guilty by geography, right? Yeah. Like in Miami, there is a disproportionate number of people. Not saying John Ruiz is among them, but there are characters where nobody really knows where the money comes from. Nobody really cares. Everybody's a great Gatsby. Like in this town, it's not like New England where it's like, what's your name? Who's your daddy? What's your legacy? Nobody cares. Everybody's like, you got money? Come on in, like, and as long as the checks are clearing, the credit card is going through, and the booze is flowing, nobody cares in Miami. And so in that regard, we do have around our institutions, around our politicians, a disproportionate number of kind of unscrupulous people who perhaps got their money through mysterious or even ill-gotten means. And so that's going to happen. That's going to rub off everywhere because Miami is just that kind of a place. And you're going to have, you're not going to have, for example, drug money launderers or, back in the 80s, the University of Miami student parking lot looked like the lot of a luxury car dealership because all of the princes and princesses of the cocaine cowboys were attending the University of Miami. And so they drove those gorgeous, exotic, expensive cars from the Prestige or the Collection, one of these major duty luxury car dealerships. And so Miami's just that town. So invariably, even legitimate institutions like the University of Miami is going to, after the Great Recession, as Warren Buffett said, when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked, right? So all of the Ponzi schemes start collapsing. And so it turned out that the University of Miami had connections to not one, not two, but three different Ponzi schemers that had a relationship in some way or another with the University of Miami. But again, it's like I said, guilty by geography, man.
Did the cocaine cowboys era at the U coincide with the Luther Campbell era?
Oh yeah, there was definitely overlap because that was like, it coincides with the explosion in success and popularity of the program. Because Schnellenberger comes in what, 79, and the first Cocaine Cowboys documentary effectively begins with the Dadeland shooting in July of '79.
Wow.
So that entire story parallels, and that's part of the reason why the hurricanes were so important in that time, because it was an era in which Miami was declared on the front page of Time magazine as Paradise Lost. So people were down on Miami. And it's like when we were talking about the Heat, it became this us against the world mentality. And when Miami was being ravaged by drug wars, by race riots resulting from police officers killing unarmed black men, when Miami was ravaged by the Mariel boat lift as depicted at the beginning of Scarface so famously, Miami was being kind of torn in every direction. It was becoming a minority majority town slowly, and there was a lot of tension. And yet the Miami Hurricanes started to come up out of nowhere. And yes, there were guys from the streets of Miami that not only were playing on that team, but who were being supported or who were supporting that team to an extent. And honestly, let's be real, guys like Luther Campbell, they were NIL guys, right? They were pre, everybody's kind of postmodern Uncle Luke now. Back then, they were really, and what were they doing? They were giving guys money to pay for diapers for their babies because they were college kids going to school and playing football and practice. I mean, like, what was the crime there? It never really made a lot of sense.
Well, and my biggest thing about all this, because I've been a proponent of this for a long time, even understanding that there would be learning curves and market corrections along the way, is for a long time now, a lot of these young adults, which is what they are, have been completely exploited by old white guys who were enriching themselves and their schools, but let's go ahead and call them what they are, corporations, at the expense of these kids' potential long-term health here.
NIL is a mess right now, but I don't blame John Ruiz or these collectives or whatever. I blame the NAACP.
The NCAA?
I blame the NCAA. I blame the NCAA. And the reason is they had ample time to figure this out. They had not years, they had decades to collectively come up with best practices. Mark Cuban was always tweeting about, I got ideas, hit me up. Like, he tweeted better ideas than what we wound up with. He was tweeting about the playoff system in college football years before they bothered with it. And the truth is, they never wanted to fix this. Nope. Because, like you said, they were profiting from. Why would they want to reform the system that all the money was trickling up to them at the top, and the workers who were generating this revenue on their backs and their bones and their blood and their brains, for that matter, were not benefiting from this system. It was a plantation system. It was totally misguided, and the people who were supposed to be policing it were the people who were profiting from it. So when you have an organization, like the NCAA, that is making the laws, interpreting the laws, and benefiting from that enforcement, that's absolute power, and that corrupts absolutely. And they could have come up with a system that was universal, that applied. Instead, they put it off until individual states and legislators started going, hey, you're not going to do it, we'll do it. So you can wind up with 15 different states with 15 different laws, and nobody knows what the hell's going on. And this is their mess. I put it right in Mark Emmert's feet.
And they continue to enforce their rules subjectively, and they're not even like embracing this idea now to try and keep themselves viable. Their biggest fight at this point is trying to keep college athletes from being considered university employees, even though it seems obvious to anybody paying half attention that that's ultimately what has to happen here, especially at the highest levels of college sports. But I'm with you. The NCAA needs to be completely abolished. Their worth was minimized a long, long time ago. At this point, all they are is a slight waste of time for everybody trying to actually get shit done,
Amen.
All right, he is Billy Corben. Check out any of his many documentaries. That includes Cocaine Cowboys, of course, Screwball, and his newest God Forbid on Hulu. You just heard it is the most popular Hulu documentary series of all time. Also, check him out at the ATX Film Festival this weekend. Go to atxfestival.com for tickets and to find out more info and listen to his new podcast. I think you can watch it as well. And it's called Because Miami, co-hosted by Dan Le Batard. Billy, thank you so much for the time, man. Safe travels to and from Austin this weekend.
Thanks, Trey.
Thanks to Gentleman Jesus for the intro and outro music. Hear more of his work at gentlemanjesus.com. And thanks to you for hanging out. For more of the show and to connect on social media, visit booksonpod.com. We'll talk to you next time on Books on Pod.